Do you feel experiences of racism have affected your mental health? As statistically black people are less likely to access primary care and early intervention mental health services. Why do we think that is?
I think for me, in terms of racism affecting mental health, it's, even as an adult, even if people aren't having racist thoughts about me, I perceive it to happen, like I'm almost preempting it. And there's a way of like, it's quite stressful because it's how I always feel like I constantly have to smile, not dress a certain way, be more like palatable to certain audiences, and that is, for me, that is quite stressful, and it's like I'm always perceiving that I'm going to be judged, which has taken its toll.
I think for me, when I think about it, you know, quite detailed and reflect, and going forward as well, I think less so now, but it definitely has for a long time induced anxieties, because in particular, really a lot more so when I was young, is I would automatically, the minute that I went anywhere that was out of any area, I'd be looking for representation straight away. And even like I've had past partners who will say to me, why every time everywhere we go someone and you see a black man, you let onto him or whatever else, because I know that he knows that we're the only ones here who look like us. And just having that acknowledge of even just a nod, or just a, you know, acknowledges to him and to me that actually, you know, it's okay. And for me, for a long time, anywhere I went, especially in pubs, I'd get real anxiety about going to pubs. I get such anxiety with pubs,
it's like working men's clubs and that kind of vibe.
Exactly. Not, as I say, it's a lot less now. It does come up again when I go out, say, into really rural areas and things like that. But for a long time, I think that was probably the main thing for me. If I can think of a topic that's quite broad for most people, I would have thought.
Walking into a white space and everyone's staring at you and it going quiet, or turning up for an appointment if you've made it on the phone and people not expecting you to have this skin tone because of your accent. And I guess, like you were saying, it's that accumulation, it builds up. It might be little subtle things, it might be overt things, but it builds up and it's still the same wound eventually.
I might not be thinking anything of the sort, but it's just like it's funny what you just said about pubs. I was literally in a pub the other day near mine, and my other half was like, oh, do you want to nip to the bar? I'm just going to nip to the bar. And I was like, I really don't want to nip to the bar. And for me, it felt really rational in the moment, and he understood because he knows how I feel. But I feel like I'm just going to be stared at and judged, and I don't. It's been like that since I was probably like first started going out, like 16. Shouldn't have been going out, but
I think as well, like sometimes people focus on intention, or they didn't mean it, but really we shouldn't focus on the intention, we should focus on the outcome. You know, if the outcome is the same as someone saying something overt as it is somebody saying, you know, where are you really from, you know, we need to focus on how it impacts on a person. And for me, like, you know, you were saying, going into pubs and certain areas, you just feel like you're sticking out and someone's going to say something or do something, or, you know, whether it's cross the street to avoid you, or if you're on a bus and, you know, the bus is full and there's an empty seat next to you but they don't want to sit next to you. It's those things have a big impact, you know.
Yeah, but it does. I feel like growing up, you kind of, but for me, I was sort of labelled as quite like the naughty child. And growing up again, being more self-aware, I question a lot of it, and I think sometimes I wonder to myself, like, is it because I'm black? Is it because I'm mixed race? That's the way that I was treated? And I battle with myself about what those happened and think, no, they didn't have those intentions. But then the fact of the matter is that I was treated differently, and I was behaving similar to someone like my whiter peers. So for me, it did feel like I was discriminated against.
It's hard to validate it. It's not validated.
Yeah. So then what? There's a real, I mean, not to interrupt, but there's a real point there that you made, and it's something that I've been thinking throughout this. And like as a child, I always wanted to be a singer or a comedian, and a lot of I mean, probably the sort of stereotype is that a lot of black people go into sort of entertainment type fields. And I feel because of that maybe systemic push, if you like, into that field for a very long time, had an effect on me as well. And I was like yourself, right? And I was the class clown, sort of the performing monkey, if you like. You know, that's probably the elephant in the room, and that's what I felt like a lot as growing up, because that's what I always sort of.
People just assume you can sing.
Yeah, well,
I don't mind that so much, but they do just assume you can sing. But it's not from nowhere, this like feeling of like being judged. I mean, I've had really quite violent racial attacks, like verbal attacks. Like I've had a grown man in the street when I was 12, like going, "I'm going to spit on your ancestors, you dirty N-word, get back home." There's so many periods of time I've been told that I need to go home. Do you speak the language? You know, it's not come from nowhere. I think the perception is that we're sensitive and we're just reading into things, and it's not come from nowhere. So
Chip on the shoulder.
Chip on the shoulder's a big one. So I think sometimes people will say those things because they don't have the full picture.
Of all the thoughts and feelings that you carry on just by going into a room. And then there's other things that really bother me is like the labels of like aggression as well. Because I am mad, I am angry, I have to think about these extra things all the time.
You have to be conscious of it.
I have to manage
Toxic
it.
stress.
I have to,
I've got that with my son as well. He's just, it's like you're describing my son to me, the stories that you're saying, exactly splitting, that's exact, constantly angry, and he's thinking, I've got a reason to be angry, I don't think it's, I'm being
allowed to be, I should be allowed to be.
and I should be allowed to be, kind of thing. And I wonder if, the going into the bar thing and seeing somebody similar to you, why, I wonder if that is a big cue as to why we should have more representation in the mental health services. I mean, if you just walk into a place and there's no connection, you right from reception, from the people you're seeing, and you're thinking, no, there is that. Probably, I'm thinking, if we're all saying there's that, when you walk into a place you don't feel comfortable, if you don't find the representation.
It moves through different venues. And that's why I think a lot of black people are we don't access early intervention services straight away, and I think we're overrepresented in statistics of being sectioned because we let it fester. And I think not seeing people that you can relate to plays a massive part into that.
I think as well though, not only that, I have seen it and I've experienced it with clients as well in the past who I've worked with, and obviously I'm able to relate to them in that sense of that they've gone to access services, or they're trying to, or considered accessing services, and as they've attempted, the sort of, because of that anger and that sort of bravado, if you like, that, and it's a protective factor, it's a protective, mask that as people from BAME backgrounds have to have, I think, just due to what we've been through. Anyone from not from that sort of background that's immediately taken back, and if I'm coming in and I'm being abrupt, or I'm putting on that bit of anger, it's like, oh, it's the angry black man. I don't think I can work with this person, or so then that prevents them, and they think, well, why should I go and access the service?
Culturally, there's not like another way of expressing yourself, because I think culturally it's like we don't cry, we don't access support, we don't talk about things. Definitely from like a Caribbean perspective, we don't talk about mental health. So if that's ingrained in you, then you build up the courage to access services. It might just be like a rude receptionist, or it might be that you're just like so anxious that you can't really think straight, that you're not communicating properly. You've reached that step, and then you don't get what you've come for as well. So then you're deterred in future.
And I think when you think about even the generational trauma that we've had to experience, and it really interests me, and I think that that's a big impact in the figures and the amount of people from those backgrounds that are still experiencing that. When you think of having to the Windrush generations coming over, being sent as a 15, 16-year-old young person, exactly, leaving the parents, leaving the families for years to go and earn money and try and bring them back, or vice versa, the parents leaving and leaving children with other family members or people that might not even been really, you know, fit to be taking care of children at that point. And that was going on for so long, and then to then be integrated into a society where people didn't accept you, and you was given the, you know, the lowest sort of the low poverty you know, environment to try and grow and work through, you know, there's no wonder that that's still there.
And touching on that, statistically, the numbers are higher for mental health, you know, within the black community. But if we look at the research and the evidence that, you know, trauma affects up to 17 generations, so where does that put many people who are black heritage? You know, my family's from the Caribbean, those were enslaved people. You know, if you think about what's gone on there and how that's transmitted through the generations, and then do we have any trauma-based, race-based things to help people with that? That's just dismissed.
Yeah, I don't think even hearing that statistic, like, that's a fact. But I think a lot of people would hear that and just be like, no, you need to push through, you need to get on with it, you just need to forget about the past and focus on the future. And that kind of rhetoric is actually really damaging.
It really is,
And then it leads to that substance misuse, it leads to, you know, self-medicating, you know, and that's just continues from generation until that chain has been broken, and it's still
hard to break that chain.
It's still almost, you know, impossible with the way that, you know, society is to cut that cord.
But even when the black diaspora have tried to get their own identity in this country, especially, so Rastafarianism, they were vilified. There was a famous person, I think he was called Rastafari Everton or something. He was in the 80s. He was taken to court because he wasn't working and stuff like that. The media just absolutely hammered him because he was Rastafarian, and so this country's just got such a history of demonising certain cultures and peoples, because we've always got to have an enemy, haven't we? And just
divide and conquer.
So
I feel like there's like two layers there. So there's one that's like the experience of the discrimination and oppression, but then also that experience being invalidated and not listened to, and having to kind of like internalise all them feelings and just being like dismissed. So there's like two there. And I think in terms of like access to mental health, if we're talking about the majority of therapists and workers being white, having your therapist be the person who doesn't understand and completely misunderstanding that kind of layer, I think that completely makes sense why they wouldn't want to go to services.
And it is, and I think it's really important, and that's why, you know, even when I think about it now, and I'd love to think that by me, you know, because my other role is and profession is as a counsellor, so to think that, you know, young black males in particular, because I know the statistics for those are just so alarming, to have that representation, and for them to see, and me to be able to talk to them on their level and understand their language, that it encourages them and encourages us to change that. And for
it's so hard to find a black male, like a black counsellor in general, but a black male counsellor.
Well, to be honest,
I've got two in the room.
I've worked here for like 6 months now. I've not actually had one like person of Caribbean background as a client in counselling, and to me it's really shocking, to be honest.
Yeah, we have a big population.
Well, like I was saying, and I was alluding to before, and that anger and that sort of bravado, I did have a client, and a lot of it stemmed from that, and it was funny really, because I did see that a little bit as well, that sort of side of it, where, you know, people were a little bit feared and whatever else, but because, you know, I could see through that and I understood that, I felt that even they found it a lot easier to be able to open up and connect with me, and actually we did some really good work. So I mean, even if, you know, we only see one, person come through the door from,
it's worth doing.
Exactly.
Well, to be honest, in a previous job, it's different. I did actually speak to a client who came from a black background, and a lot in counselling is to do with like your counselling relationship. And I know sometimes when you connect you can just feel it straight away. And with that client in particular, it was just I felt like it was amazing, and it was just progress, and I felt like, similar to you said, Denver, that it was just it was working, whatever was going on. I don't want to talk too much into depth about what the counselling was, but I'm just kind of agreeing with what you're saying, with how the difference is, if that makes sense.